Let's talk.
Charles Brown.
I have one of my... He's actually he's become a regular guest now on the show. Last time we were talking about Project Mbappe. It was fascinating indeed. So we got him back on because there is a paperback version of a new book called Football Hackers, The Science and Art of a Data Revolution. It is by renowned and respected journalist Christoph Biermann, and I'm delighted to say that Christoph joins us live on the line from some dugout somewhere near a football pitch. Christoph, good morning to you, sir.
From Berlin, actually.
You're in Berlin?
Yes, I am.
One of my favourite football teams is Hertha Berlin because I just like the idea of a Berlin-based football team, especially in the old days. But there you go. So,
but you probably also heard about Union Berlin, and they even made it to the Champions League recently.
Right.
Not too long ago.
Yeah. So football, it's a funny old game. I was having a chat this morning over coffee with my Spanish friend, okay? And he said, in my next life, I want to come back as a Chelsea manager because you do 5 weeks work and you get 28 million euros. We call it finiquito in Spain. It's where you have to pay somebody to get them to go away. And we were remarking how crazy the market is indeed, Christoph. It is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely mad, and especially at Chelsea, because I remember times when they looked like a well-run club, pretty good, pretty well organized, good structure. Good German manager, Thomas Tuchel.
Indeed.
Yeah.
As a Chelsea fan myself, Christoph, we are still wondering. We have managers and then it is the graveyard. Anyway, we can't talk about Chelsea because people will be throwing things at the wireless. However, it's interesting because one of the things that people were saying about the ex-Chelsea manager who we just lost is the fact that it was all corporate speak. It was like he'd taken one of those Tony Robbins How to Be a Manager book or How to Improve Your Life and swallowed it sideways and was coming out with all this kind of, the TV series The Office about huddles and playing Simply the Best by Tina Turner. But the data revolution has changed sort of the way that people approach football rather than the sort of Brian Clough sort of Derby County kick it up the middle of the pitch and see what happens. So explain a little bit about the background to this book, Christoph.
I was fascinated about this data stuff for a long time. So I started collecting stories, started collecting backgrounds to understand what people are doing. And actually, Thomas Tuchel, as we were talking about him, he's one of the characters in the book because he was, I would say, an early adopter to this kind of stuff. And so his football is partly data-led. So he works a lot with data, trying to understand the performance of his players, performance of his team, also opposing teams, so he is very much into it, and that's true also now for his work with the English national team.
But when we say data, because that is a word that is, we're checking the data. We see people scrabbling around on their tablets. What data are we looking at? What is the important data? Which data do they need? Because it must be different for whatever position you're playing, Christoph.
Yeah, exactly. You're looking at first. There were times when we were just counting shots and corners and duels and stuff like this. Now we know where on the pitch everything is happening. So we have a bigger context now. We also know what happened around a certain situation. So we have even more context. So how many players were close to somebody who was shooting at the goal? Where were they looking? Where were the goalkeeper players? And so on. So this whole stuff contains more content now and has a bigger background. And so what we call now is we call it complex data or so on. And you're right. There are so many options to look at it. To understand the performance of players. Look, for example, goalkeepers. to judge goalkeepers, to distinguish between the number of goals they conceded, but how good was the quality of the shots they got on goal. And sometimes goalkeepers are better in preventing goals, and you can see it by numbers now, where maybe 10 years ago you only had a vague feeling or so.
But the thing is, and presumably you are also compiling the data for your opposition, and I would make if for example, if I'm going to be playing Fulham or Aston Villa, my data people, and each club now has data people, Christoph, I'm imagining. They have data departments nowadays.
No. But the interesting thing is, are they listened to? So that is a crucial point.
Because here is the thing, because, my main sport is, as everybody will know, is motor racing, because my father was a racing driver. Okay, so we can tell where you should be braking, that's pretty easy. And a driver like Fernando Alonso, who is God here, will use that information so he will know how to brake milliseconds later or whatever. Football is a more visceral game, if you like, because it's the competition. You have the sound of, have the intimidation of playing at the Bernabeu or something like that. The ball comes to you. You're not going to think, I should run 0.5 seconds earlier, or I should be looking. You're just going to think, ball there, hit it, aren't you? So how do you relay, or how do you get it through to the footballers who maybe don't come from Harvard and Yale, that they should be doing this?
You don't have to teach them in understanding numbers, and even a lot of the managers wouldn't be able to go through to complex data files and so on. Therefore, you have your data department, and then you have to translate it into something players have to do on the pitch. And but I think the biggest field is not so much the preparation of players for the next game or the preparation of game in itself, but recruitment. So to find the exact player you want to have on a certain position for your team to encourage the quality for the next season.
But when you say for recruitment, are we talking about established players, or because there's always been feeder clubs? I mean, now, great clubs like Ajax, unfortunately, tend to act as a feeder club. Strasbourg acts as a feeder club. And it's always been kind of a case that you go down to Brazil or Argentina and see which 14-year-old is setting that thing alight. Are they using the data for then, or are they saying, okay, there is a player playing in France who would be really good playing in the Premiership?
No, it's even going to the third level of French football, or the fourth level of Spanish football, or so. And that is part of the data revolution. It started in very few top leagues where the clubs had money and where they started collecting data. But now we have data available for most of the first divisions all over the world. So in some countries below that.
So where did this spark come from? Do they go over to the States, where obviously they have all the data on the NFL? I mean, when did this data revolution start happening then in football?
It started around 15 years ago, when people started to have this data, started to collect this data, and then to people try to make sense of it. And there are two clubs on the forefront of this revolution, and Brentford and Brighton and Hove Albion. And most people know that they have owners that have a very different background to the rest of the owners, because they come from the betting industry. And people from the betting industry, they were always trying to understand, to measure the quality of a team, to make the odds good in their sense. And these people, Matthew Benham in Brentford and Tony Bloom, the owner of Brighton and Hove Albion, they started to rethink we are in this industry. We know about the use of data, but how can we use it in our favor? And when you look at the transfers that Brighton and Brentford did, and with how little money compared to the bigwigs of the Premier League, they assembled fantastic teams. You can see how much of an advantage a smart use of data brings.
Is this going to get rid of the traditional sort of scout in football? You know, the guy who goes to a wet Wednesday in Wigan to watch with a big coat on, etc., and comes back saying we should check this guy out.
Yeah, the art of it is to combine it. You have data, but then you have the guy in the coat going to Wigan or Stoke or wherever and trying to make sense of how a player behaves, how does he interact with his colleagues, how does he interact during a game, and so on. And this is something that data doesn't show you exactly.
Christoph, I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, and I love it when people say, whenever it's like the worst place you can...
When you mentioned the rain...
Yeah, the rain, it's always Stoke-on-Trent. It's never, Wigan and Stoke...
Yeah, but is that true? I mean, is that when you look at the data, is it always rain?
Yes.
Are you in Spain because of the rain?
Yes, well, not many of us go back from Marbella to Stoke. What I really want to do is buy a small cottage in Stoke and retire. It never happens, Christoph. So presumably we can imagine then that the giant, for example, here I am in Spain, Barcelona, Real Madrid, huge amounts of cash. They are leviathans of football. Are they now scrambling to get the best data people to work and give them top? Is it going to work? Are we going to have like a market for data analyzers?
Yeah, there is. They also change clubs. Talents are scouted, brought to bigger clubs. But interestingly, so as far as I know it, Spanish football, they belong to the late adopters, I would say. And I mean, when you look at Barcelona and Real, they're following different roads. I mean, but Real is always collecting players that need to be spectacular in this Galacticos logic. So you simply try to buy the best players in the world. How much data do you need? Barcelona is bringing through a lot of players from their own academy. And when you looked at the transfer they made, where they spend a lot of money, but not so very impressive.
The thing with Real Madrid, and I say this every time, is that Real Madrid is a monster of a machine because it gets in players who are brilliant elsewhere, and the machinery and the politics, it breaks most players. You get these, people like Hazard, people like Woodgate. They come. Yes, you get the Galacticos like Mbappe, but the kill rate of players who leave Real Madrid broken, because if you don't make it Real Madrid, you're kind of tainted, aren't you? And there's no amount of data, perhaps. Could it see them getting less Galacticos, and then they've got the politics of Spanish football?
Yeah, but the idea of Real Madrid is not to be seen as clever and smart. I think they want to be seen as massive. They want to be seen as, so we buy the best players. And if they don't succeed, okay, the next one will be coming.
What about the psychological aspects of this? Because you've covered you sort of uncovered in your research some bits that really change the way we look at the game, Christoph.
What are you referring to?
Well, I mean, I just mean because we think of data and we think of stats, but there's also the other aspects to young. To the majority of young men. They are bought and traded. That you might be playing in Santos one day, and the next thing you're playing in the Swedish league, and you've got no friends, and then you're over to France, and then so. I mean, is there any sort of look at that sort of aspect if we're doing the holistic?
I mean, that's it. It's a crucial aspect to understand football and to understand football players. If a player is suited for a certain situation, for example, as we were talking about Real Madrid, you bring a lot of talent on the football side, but do you have the talent to stand the enormous pressure you will face in Madrid? people are trying to test it. But I think it's more of a question of experience, that people who hire these players, that they have to dug out from when you talk to them, when you inquire about their life and so on. So yeah.
How do you? Because the thing about football, though, and my other second sport is rugby union. So if you've got New Zealand playing Fiji, 10 times out of 10, they're going to beat Fiji because of the game. The wonderful thing about football, as an occasional watcher, is that you have these moments when, Macclesfield beats Arsenal, or all these cup upsets. The romance we talk about the game, the results that Iceland beating England, for example, in the Euros, Czech Republic, winning the Euro. I mean, beating Italy. Can you factor luck into the data?
Yeah, I mean, the most popular thing we have right now is expected goals, and you expected goals where you measure the probability of a shot, of a goal chance, and then you see there is a gap between how many expected goals you amass during a game and how many actual real goals you score. And this gives you a very good indicator, especially over over a season, if you're lucky or if you're unlucky, if you're lucky in scoring goals or unlucky in not scoring enough goals, if you're lucky in not conceding many goals, or if you're unlucky in conceding more goals from worse chances. And this is also coming back from the betting industry, because they really want to know, is a team really that good as the results say? Or if you look at the underlying performance and the quality of the performance is not as good as a result. And there is a lot of energy put in this. It's also true for players. I mean, sometimes players score a lot of goals from very few goal chances, and then we are saying, "Oh, they are so effective," and applaud them. But I would say very often it's only says that they are lucky.
So, what are you hoping that people will learn? I mean, is it going? How's the information you've got while doing this book? Has it increased your love for the game, or in a world where we're going to have one of the more interesting World Cups of recent years, are you just thinking, oh, this is becoming more corporate and it's all coming down to people playing Football Manager on their PlayStations or whatever? Does this book increase your love for the game, and will it help people understand the process more?
Yeah, it's very much so. It increased it even more, because why do I write this kind of book? Because I want to know more about it. I want to understand football better. So that is my initial idea, and I do that because I love the game, because I love to watch it. I love the people in the game, and so hopefully people get a more complex view on football, find it even more interesting, even more fascinating, because there is so much more going on to understand it.
The book is called Football Hackers, The Science and Art of a Data Revolution. It's by Christoph Biermann. Christoph, if people want to follow you online and say nice things about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter, but honestly, I've been very, how can I say that, passive there recently.
And as we may not speak to you before the World Cup, we've got 1 minute. Who are you thinking? What is your data telling you? And what is your heart telling you, Christoph?
I mean, the beauty of the World Cup is there's always a big chance for outsiders to go very far. But I think the usual suspects: France, Spain, and England. I'm not so optimistic for the German team.
Okay, fair enough. And those of us north of the border in Scotland will be choking on their iron brew this morning. This book is called Football Hackers. It is by the brilliant Christoph Biermann, friend of the show. Christoph, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.